I got halfway in front of him, so it was my corner at that point. So I tried to leave him as much room as I could, but he just wanted to stick on the outside, so I had to push him off.
Say what you will about the youth movement in IndyCar racing, it certainly has given us a lot to talk about post-race Mid-Ohio race number 2, but the entire weekend as a whole was a mix of both old and new in IndyCar racing, and that's what's kind of been so great about the current crop of drivers we have. We have some of the classic drivers still running up front, but we have the new breed that will hopefully be around for a long time. Of course, the Mid-Ohio weekend was one we weren't even sure was going to happen. The question marks surrounding this race were kind of up until the last minute. Of course, this was originally scheduled. Well, originally scheduled, of course, means it was supposed to happen in August. It was supposed to then, I think they moved it a week back to be the race before the Indianapolis 500. And then it got canceled literally last minute. I think it was the Sunday before, so a week before the race was supposed to happen, the doubleheader, which had been moved to at that point. And no thanks to Governor Mark DeWine of Ohio, it was very difficult to get this race scheduled. Thankfully, everybody was able to come to a compromise, be able to get the race in this weekend, and get it in, most importantly, with fans, which was apparently very important to the Green Savory promotional arm, which owns Mid-Ohio and has really gotten boned this year with the cancellation of the Toronto race, Portland, and Laguna Seca, I think, as well as the current postponement of St. Petersburg. I hope that race happens, very much so. But again, it's 2020, and absolutely everything is on the table. So let's get to some highlights of what happened the last couple of days, and then let's talk about some details. Race 1 at Mid-Ohio was a bit of a tease. It seemed like rain was on its way, and then it never came. It was a wire-to-wire victory, pretty much, for Will Power, which is great for him because it's his first win on the year, and one that I think he desperately needed. Your spot is never safe at Team Penske, and some of the errors, unforced really, that have taken him out of race wins this season have finally seemed to work themselves out, and Will Power's kind of back on form as you see the top 5 here with championship current runner-up Joseph Newgarden finishing second, Alexander Rossi filling out the podium, and believe it or not, to this point in the season, and that's an asterisk next to that as we get to race 2, Rossi was scoring the only second podium for Andretti Autosport this year. Both scored by Rossi. None of the other 4 drivers to this point in the season had even scored a podium finish. Graham Rahal in his home race took 4th position. He's always strong at Mid-Ohio. Ryan Hunter-Reay looks like he's finally starting to get back on form. He's not quite a race-winning contender consistently yet, but it looks like he's getting there. And Felix Rosenqvist, who's been so strong this season, was the top Ganassi runner in race 1. Race number 2 was quite a bit different. A soggy qualification led to an interesting front row of Colton Herta and Santino Ferrucci, and the 2 young drivers got together, causing a crash, which eliminated Felix Rosenqvist and Alex Palou from the race right off the bat. Herta later admitted that he intentionally took Ferrucci off of the track. However, here's the kicker. Ferrucci was the one who got the avoidable contact penalty. Let me know down in the comments how you feel about how that particular incident was enforced. Do you think it was fair? Let's see. Scott Dixon was in rare form, making contact with Ryan Hunter-Reay and then spinning in turn 1. An unbelievable scene that, believe it or not, actually has a historical counterpoint. In 1992, championship leader, or then championship leader, Bobby Rahal crashed in the same spot on the track. Now, Dixon got to keep going, but Rahal's crash may signal a good sign for Dixon fans, believe it or not, because Rahal still managed to hang on to the 1992 championship, and I imagine, unless there's a calamity or a cataclysmic failure for Scott Dixon, he will as well. Marco Andretti also had trouble in turn 1, a very scary moment as the car stepped out big time, but somehow he managed to save it. The story in race 2 is very similar to the story in race 1. The pole sitter leading pretty much wire to wire. Colton Herta taking his 3rd win of his young IndyCar career, and once again you see Colton Herta winning a tire management race, which is very exciting. As you can see, the top 3 is incredibly notable. Andretti Autosport went from only one driver having 2 podiums on the entire year to sweeping the podium, the first time they've done that since 2005. Alexander Rossi was a challenger to Colton Herta throughout the day, but was unable to quite get there. Ryan Hunter-Reay 3rd. You can see him moving up the field slowly but steadily. Might, again, be a race-winning contender before the end of the year. Graham Rahal matching his performance from the previous day, albeit in a different livery. Marcus Ericsson, virtually nobody talked about him. I think I saw him on TV about once during the broadcast, but he brought home an admirable 5th place and the best Ganassi car at Mid-Ohio, and that, when you got Scott Dixon on your team, is always notable. Simon Pagenaud, first time we've talked about him as well, in 6th place to round out the top 6 in Mid-Ohio race number 2. So there are some takeaways to take away from Mid-Ohio. First thing I want to talk about is these double headers. We of course have one more coming up at Indianapolis for the Harvest Grand Prix. And of course it is unique circumstances this year, so obviously I can be a little more lenient on the double headers. They've worked at some tracks. I think Road America and Iowa were certainly good, but other tracks it almost feels like overkill. And I know Roger Penske, one of the reasons I'm talking about this, has mentioned his desire to do more double headers. I would caution against that. I think variety is the spice of life, especially in a series as unpredictable as IndyCar, or at least as unpredictable as IndyCar can be. I think you want them at more tracks and more markets, a more interesting schedule. Certainly it would probably save the team some money going forward, but if you look at that Gateway doubleheader, do you really want, if the package isn't right or if just the racetrack isn't producing very good racing, do you really want to have to do 2 races at the same track? My feeling would be no. I mean, just look at Formula One. I know it's a completely different league money-wise and the ability for them to do things. But if you look at that Mugello race, even though obviously the headline still reads Lewis Hamilton won it, it was extremely entertaining. It was completely unpredictable, and it was a good product. It was exciting to watch. I think, again, variety is the spice of life. So if you said, hey, would you like to see a Mid-Ohio doubleheader next year? I would say, hell no. Go to Cleveland. Go somewhere else, If you really need to do 2 races in Ohio, there's a great airport in Cleveland. You should use that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what took place. Let's talk about some of the drivers who actually performed in the race, and then we'll talk about the championship. Certainly the 2 winners, Will Power and Colton Herta. In a normal year, probably preseason, we were probably thinking that these 2 drivers were championship contenders. However, of course, that hasn't worked out for one reason or another. Certainly, a lot of the good tracks, or a lot of the tracks that Colton Herta is very good at, got eliminated from the championship, as well as some of Will Power's best tracks. So that certainly hurt them, but of course mistakes have as well. We remember on this channel, Colton Herta has mentioned to us a couple of times that he really wanted to be in championship contention going into the last race. Doesn't look like he is this year. However, he is 4th in points, easily the best of the Andretti Autosport team for this year. Getting a race win under his belt is good. He usually comes on pretty strong in the late season, as we've seen with Portland and Laguna Seca last year. Very strong. So it'll be interesting to see how he does in the Grand Prix of Indianapolis. He was pretty fast there in July. How fast will he be there in October? We'll have to wait and see. Will Power, it was nice to see some of those pit lane gremlins finally leave him. It seemed like that was where he was losing races. He probably would be in championship contention if he performed better at Texas, performed better at the GP of Indy, because those are races that if not win, could have easily been podium positions for Will Power, and they weren't. The incident at the start is interesting. I mentioned how Colton didn't get a penalty, Santino did. And I see both sides of it. I think my judgment on that would be either everybody gets a penalty or nobody gets a penalty. Because yes, Santino definitely drove back onto the track and took his teammate out, as well as Felix Rosenqvist. That being said, Colton definitely forced him off the track. Do you really want to encourage drivers to force other drivers off the track? I don't know. So that's my opinion really on whether or not Colton should have gotten a penalty. I think you have to enforce it evenly. If there's avoidable contact in one instance, there's avoidable contact in the other, because it does take two to tango, and definitely there were two drivers getting into each other. Championship. Scott Dixon, like I mentioned, it's not a game over. It was a choke today. It could have been way worse. He did not stuff it in the wall. And so that definitely saved his bacon today. If he crashed, Newgarden would have made up a lot more points. How it ended up working out is Newgarden went from a 90-point deficit to Scott Dixon to a 70-point deficit to Scott Dixon. Obviously not great, not amazing, but also not completely insurmountable. Now, that being said, Scott Dixon could pretty much clinch the championship by the time they leave Indianapolis for the final time this year. And again, pending the St. Pete race happening, that could be championship over one way or another for Scott Dixon. I mean, he's got essentially a two-race lead. Newgarden needs a lot of help for Scott Dixon to not win the championship. Again, we're just going to have to kind of see how it plays out. I think it was smart money is on Scott Dixon winning his, sixth championship? I think it's 6 now. It could be 7. I think it's 7 next year when he wins it again, right? That being said, or just kind of wrapping up, it was nice to see Andretti Autosport get that podium finish, that total podium finish anyway, the sweep. Definitely reminded me of the old Andretti Green days of Tony Kanaan and Brian Herta and Dario Franchitti and Dan Weldon. They do have some interesting opportunities this offseason too. I think they could really put together a super team there. And not to disparage anybody, but the only two contracts that are locked in right now are Rossi and Herta. And quite honestly, the two drivers that you would want to be locked in a contract year are those two drivers if you're looking at Andretti Autosport. Do you keep Ryan Hunter-Reay? Probably. Do you keep Zach Veach? Is there any way you could convince Marco to retire? Probably not. Marco was running third at one point today. That's another thing. Of course, it was strategy, but I guess it's worth mentioning anytime Marco runs up front. So, that was Mid-Ohio. Can't wait to wait 3 weeks for two snooze fests at the Indy road course. I really wish... I implore you guys. I implore you to change the layout. Run the full turn 13 that F1 did. At least once. Come on. Please. Please, I'm begging you. Just a little something different. Throw something in there to make it a little more exciting, or at least give us some form of unpredictability. I know it's tough with Firestone and the fact that they have to make a compound that is safe. Totally get it. Totally understand it. But at the same time, boy, it's going to be a rough weekend to sit through 2 races at the Indy GP. But what are you going to do? Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. I hope you have enjoyed this review of the Mid-Ohio race. I'm going to keep pumping out the content. Got some ideas. Going to keep talking about the news, obviously, as well. Hope you'll be here to drink that all in. Subscribe if you haven't already. It's a good place to be if you're a racing fan. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.